Well, they don't call it clean old-fashioned hate for nothing. Brent Key and Georgia Tech hate the way this one ended once again.
You are Locked On Georgia Tech, your daily podcast on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, guys? Welcome into Locked On Georgia Tech. I am one of your hosts, Caleb Johnson, tucked away deep in the bowels of Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So is my co-host, who has been covering Atlanta sports for the last 15 years, Jarvis Davis. We're hiding from people so that we can get this podcast to you live. And right off the bat, we want to start off by saying thank you for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, and wherever you go to get them, please leave us a 5-star review. Today on the show, we're going to get into, did Kirby copy his game plan? Was defense not really the problem this time around? But first, Jarvis, missed opportunities in this game for the Yellow Jackets as they ultimately lose. They're calling this the Atlanta Gridiron Classic, but I don't think that's going to catch on to anyone, Jarvis.
Nobody's going to call it that, yes.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Like sometimes they try to make fetch happen. Well, this time around, it's clean old-fashioned hate for a reason. And the hate, Jarvis, literally started from the beginning of this game, where it was Keelan Rutledge who didn't shake hands when the captains came out to meet one another. And then ultimately a penalty against Keelan Rutledge is a big factor in this game that we didn't get a great explanation of on TV in the stadium. I'm seeing fans say that they put it up on the Jumbotron on the Halo board, but I surely didn't get a great look at what that decision was there. But it started off, these two teams don't like each other, and it finished in a similar fashion. And a lot of it, unfortunately, was Georgia Tech not able to capitalize on some pretty key factors.
When you think about the way this game started off, you had Shane Marshall taking a knee. I don't know what that was to start the game, and then you had a missed opportunity or missed throw to Dean Marshall. No, I'm sorry, not Dean Marshall. Dean Patterson, excuse me. Dean Patterson, that throw, and Ellis Robinson ends up picking the football off. I think that there were two things going on that play for me. Like I didn't have a issue with them taking a shot, because you were moving the football, you move the football down the field, and you have to try this defense, because Glenn Schumann came into this game. His game plan was like, we know we're not going to be able to rush forward to get pressure on this quarterback. And you saw there were opportunities that they were able to take advantage of by, when Georgia rushed forward, Haynes King looked good in the pocket, right? But when they sent pressure, and they did it quite often in moments, like on 2nd and 3rd down, 2nd and short, 3rd and long, they were able to, get to the quarterback. But I think that overall they just missed out on the opportunity on particularly that one play, because I thought that player or that person, Dean Patterson, shouldn't have been in the game. I feel like Isiah Canion should have got that opportunity, because he's the only wide receiver on this squad that is a mismatch, regardless of who he lines up against, right? I know Dalen Everett is really good. Ellis Robinson has been coming along this year, but I feel like Isiah Canion is a guy who is a mismatch when he lines up, regardless of who's a lineup across him. I thought that they missed the opportunity there, and then also Haynes King threw the ball a little bit too upfield, where he didn't even give Patterson the opportunity to even catch the football. So it was a couple of things going on that particular play, and that just kind of spoke to the entire night, right? Like when you're playing against a top 5 team in the country, you're going to get opportunities, because they are forced to manufacture pressure, right? When they're forced to manufacture pressure, that means they're going to have to play man coverage. And you had your guys wins a few times in coverage, and you weren't able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think some of the throws for Haynes, that like that specific one you're mentioning too, of trying to go deep, trying to take your shots, because that was like things we had talked about leading into this game was you were going to need to take your shots, take your opportunities to be competitive in this game. And what did we also talk about previously, even before this week, Jarvis, is the problem that this Yellow Jackets offense had with getting in the red zone and getting field goals. I don't know that I'm like super critical of Buster Faulkner's play calling over the course of the game. I think there was one strange miscommunication on a 3rd and 2 where, it looked pretty clear like Jamal Haynes is coming across the formation and he's supposed to go out and get a quick pass. And you had Beetham, the tight end, who he takes off downfield like he's playing to go for a pass, and he doesn't chip at all. And so there's a man right in Jamal Haynes' face, and he has to take on the blocker, which means Haynes King has nowhere to go with the football.
True.
And while you say, that's that's one down, there was much more football to be played in this game. Like, that's the little moments in this one, Jarvis, where you think you got to capitalize on those types of plays if you're going to be competitive in a football game like this. And I thought really, not making anything of the Taj Butler interception, just getting 3 points out of that, it just kind of felt like it carried on throughout this game. Whereas, we talked about last year, you got out to a big lead and you ultimately, Georgia chipped away at it and got back into it and went on to all the overtimes and everything. This time around, it felt like Georgia just kept handing you opportunities and handing you opportunities to get in this football game. And you said, no thanks. We'll play safe. We'll kick field goals. And that ultimately, it hurt them. That's why they lost in the end.
Yeah, man. Like it goes back to, I even point out another play. Rodney Shelley, not picking that ball off. You gotta make that play, man. In games like this, you don't get many opportunities because, we'll talk about this a little later. When you think about Georgia game plan on offense, it kind of lines up exactly what we're talking about. Like, hey, man, like, you have to beat us. We're not gonna, give you every opportunity to beat us. Like, but when you talk about a team that's not perfect, teams that had flaws, we talked about those flaws coming to this game, not being able to rush the passer and knowing that they're going to have to manufacture pressure. And in those moments when you got that man coverage and when you picked up those blitzes, you had to execute and you weren't able to make those throws. And I think that, just from a execution standpoint, just from a play calling standpoint, I think everyone deserves a protection standpoint. It's just that it just didn't align in those moments, and it showed in the final score.
Yeah, I think the offensive game plan just sputtered way too much. This reliance on, like, you wanted to establish the run, you definitely needed to do that. But I think the way in which Georgia Tech ultimately and Buster Faulkner decided to go about it, I feel like I needed to see more aggressive play style than what they ultimately went. And picking their shots, sure, they chose some moments, but it just obviously wasn't enough. However, Jarvis, as much as we've spent time talking about missed opportunities, I know ultimately people's complaints about this Georgia Tech team through most of the season, especially after a week ago after the Pitt game, was this defense has got to play better. And quite simply, defense wasn't the problem in this one. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to family and friends, Omaha Steak delivers handcrafted perfection right to their door. I've been the recipient of some Omaha Steaks, and I got to tell you, that is one of the most exciting gifts that you can see show up on your doorstep, because it's quality meats, and you always know whatever you throw on the grill from Omaha Steaks is going to taste incredible. this week is the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are huge. You can save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select favorites during their cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See site for details. We want to thank you guys for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Jarvis, you get into ranks of, Georgia's offense and how they've looked for most of the season. They're 4th in the country coming into this game in first downs, 26th in the country in scoring. They average 34 points a game, and they run 29th in the country, 191 yards per game. That is all to say Georgia Tech's defense, who was absolutely leaking holes everywhere in the boat that they were trying to plug, found a way to hold the Bulldogs to 16 points.
Yeah, man. And when you think about the game plan that Blake Gideon came up with, and you have to give those guys credit because what they did was they said, man, you know what? We're just going to line up. We're going to play some coverage in some certain situations. And I think that, I don't necessarily on 3rd and long, I don't necessarily agree with that. But what they did was they forced Gunnar Stockton to read the defense, break down coverages, and find the open man. Go through your progressions, which I think is a weakness for him. I mean, people can argue with me that all they want. I don't care. I don't think he can go through that, and I think Blake forced him to do that. And when he had to pass the football, when they were in a must-pass situation, so I think overall, when you think about and I think that coverage was led by a guy like Amari Harvey. Amari Harvey has been playing some good football in these past couple of games. When you think of just from a coverage standpoint, he has locked down his guys. He has been that guy that, hey, if it's going up and it's a one-on-one, no help, hey, I'm putting some money on 3. And he has been excellent when it comes to from a coverage standpoint with it and being aggressive and in the tackling game as well, being aggressive. You saw how he was able to come up and from a force standpoint and just make those tackles and put the guy right down where he made. Even if Gunnar Stockton did break outside the pocket. So I think so shout out to Blake Gideon for the game plan and what he was able to do. And I think that from a coverage on the back end of this defense, man, you got some guys that really played well. Phoenix, Felton, he played well. Stepping in for Clayton Powell.
Yeah.
You just got some young guys, man, that's playing well, and then your senior, Amari Harvey stepped up as well.
Yeah, I think obviously pretty big factors of no Akila Stone in this game. You had already lost Jai Gilmore last week. Then you get into this game and Clayton Powell goes down. I mean, that's all the reason in the world, Jarvis, to go, it's just not our day. We just can't hold these guys the way that we would normally like to. And instead, Blake Gideon had this defense ready and up for the task. And I'll be the one to say it that if Blake Gideon's job was potentially up in the air after the Pitt game, I think it's secure after this Georgia game, quite frankly, because I think when you go up against a top talent team, your in-state rival who wants to attack you, wants to pick you apart, Mike Bobo had been studying the tape and knew what Georgia Tech hadn't done well, which was stop the run this year.
Sure.
And, getting into bend but don't break moments. And sometimes that phrase gets overused a lot, but Georgia Tech's offense did them no favors, especially right before the half, where they go 3 and out and immediately you're back out on the field. And I mean, that could open the game wide. You're just blow it right open if Georgia is able to march down the field and get a touchdown right before the half. They're able to hold them to a field goal. And I feel like that was pretty impactful. This is also, Jarvis, a team that had not been able to get interceptions this season. I mean, they're literally dead last in the ACC, behind Stanford with 2 interceptions this season, yet Taj ends up coming up with the pick. And I mean, it's not his fault that the offense only turns that into 3 points, but still at that point in the game, 3 points was more than enough to keep you competitive at that point. They were getting.
And I'll say, let me just say this: I'm glad. Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up Cam Spalding, because I thought EJ Lightsey he was lights out. I know that's kind of corny, but hey, I had to say it, But the way he played, the way he was downhill, I'm talking about, there was one particular play where he just knifed right behind it. They was running this, kind of running like a little outside zone blocking scheme, and the center was trying to peel back and block him. He just kind of cut right up underneath him and made the play and put the running back on the ground. I was like, man, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. And he even talked about it in the post-game presser, and he was saying how, yeah, man, didn't get the win, but he liked the way the defense played, the way they stepped up. And this one that kind of really hit me. He was just like, it kind of leaves you to wonder, what happened in those games based off the way they played tonight. And I know that it's eating them up inside, because like the way you played against the Wolfpack, the way you played against NC State, the way you played against Pitt, and you look at the way you played against the big dogs, so to speak, in the state and in the country, a true national championship contender. You just like, wow, why couldn't we do this for the last month leading up to this game? So and EJ kind of spoke to that, and it just lets you know that, I know a lot of people were kind of on Blake Gideon's head, coming into this game, but man, if a player is sitting there like, okay, wondering why we didn't play like this before, a lot of times it's on the players.
Yeah, I want to give a lot of credit to Zachary Toby in this one, who went out pretty early with an injury, but was like, he was a body that they absolutely needed. And I think fought through some, that the Georgia passing attack, can really hurt opposing teams.
Sure.
And I think Toby in the secondary, did a good job for the most part of obviously limiting things. When you're playing man coverage and you're in the red zone, players are going to make plays, and you need to make tackles. And outside of Zachariah Branch being able to break one right there in the red zone and score a touchdown, I do think that Georgia Tech as a collective group on defense did a really good job tackling the football. And that was actually, that was something that Kirby Smart, he talked about Georgia Tech's tackling, and he talked about their pad level being so precise and kind of offsetting, clearly what Georgia wanted to do in this game. But Jarvis, there was an element to this game that players talked about. I'm sure Kirby probably didn't love, because he speaks he speaks before the players. Probably didn't love hearing his players throwing out the game plan, but a game plan was thrown out that it was a bit of a copy from last year. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Maybe you want to get involved in Dyson Daniels of the Hawks getting back on his streaks of having consecutive games with steals. Maybe you want Nickeil Alexander-Walker being a part of that as well. Jalen Johnson being a leading scorer. There's a lot of different options that you can go, especially with a Hawks team that playing without Trae Young has been pretty competitive so far this season. FanDuel keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Jarvis. Quintavious Johnson, a guy who, was a big part of getting after Haynes King in this game for the Dawgs, said post-game, hey, the game plan to stop Haynes King was the same game plan we used last year. Now, it was clearly not nearly effective last year, and that was a big part of why Haynes had the type of game that he had. And, they were able to take the Dawgs to the brink in that, 8 overtime game. This time around, though, it felt like the Dawgs were able to sharpen some things up on offense. But it really felt like the game that Kirby was playing was time of possession, and don't give Haynes King the opportunity to hold the football, because then he can't make plays.
And when you talk about the type of offense that Tech has, played for this from an overall spectrum for the entire year, they've been put up some points. And what you want to do when you go up against a team like that is, because you don't want to necessarily get into a back and forth, from as far as like passing the football, because of what I talked about earlier when I talked about how Gunnar Stockton is not necessarily, that's not his game. For you to kind of say, oh, we got to pass to get back into the game. Oh yes, you want to see 14 in that type of situation. So what you want to do from an offensive standpoint to play that, have all of the different elements of your team in sync from an overall game plan standpoint, you limit those possessions. You do that by running the football, pounding it out. I mean, I know I saw some Georgia fans tweeting out like, "Oh man, this offense is putting me to sleep." Yeah, it was on purpose because guess what? If you don't put people to sleep, if you try to push the ball down the field and try to throw the ball all around the yard outside of some quick screens, you're more likely to turn the football over because of the type of game plan that Gideon put together, playing those zone coverages and having Gunnar really go through those progressions. And I think that would have been to Tech's advantage. But like you said, like Kirby said, hey, that was the same game plan. We're going to try to limit as many possessions as possible and get out of this thing with a win. And that's what ended up happening.
Yeah, 11 minutes was the difference in time of possession. The Georgia Bulldogs had the football 11 minutes.
Several possessions.
What?
That's several possessions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the thing. Like in the day and age of college football and the rules that have been changed so that there's already fewer possessions amongst the game, being able to steal a couple more away just because of you ran the ball. Georgia Bulldogs ran the ball 46 times in this football game. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, like they are a running team as much as Georgia Tech loves to run the football. But that was an inordinate amount because they were trying to slow this game down, lull everyone to sleep. There's definitely a few moments, Jarvis, in the press box that I was like, should I go grab some coffee? Because I really do.
I did grab some coffee, by the way.
Yeah, I had to. Yeah, I did. That's what it was. I saw you at halftime, and I thought, maybe I needed to follow suit just because this game had drawn out so much because of how Georgia was running the football. And quite honestly, because when Gunnar was throwing the ball, it did not look particularly good. And that was, from a secondary perspective, that's where I thought Georgia Tech had done a really good job. But as far as Haynes, like it was clear they were going to stop the run from Georgia Tech. It was just, I think, the times in which Buster Faulkner opted for running the football. And once again, Jarvis, who he decided to run the football with. I think Haynes on some of those zone reads called his number one too many times. And just because, obviously he's trying to read who's coming after him. And there were a few times that he pulled it and it was immediately met with a Georgia defender that I was thinking, okay, are you just trying to force this to make something happen here because you can run away? I think there was also a few times where Georgia Tech's offense tried something that maybe would have worked against a Pitt defense, would have worked against a Boston College defense. But a guy like Raylan Wilson is extremely fast. And,
Sure.
When you're throwing to your receivers coming across the middle, those Georgia linebackers who had CJ Allen Jarvis, we thought that man was for sure not playing because he had meniscus surgery 2 weeks ago, but he was a factor in this one. And so, for all of those reasons, you saw opportunities not working out, and essentially, Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann kind of licking their chops at what they were able to do to this Georgia Tech offense to keep it from being potent.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned, because we talked about this, man. We knew that we talked about this. We knew that Georgia was going to be stout against the run. Knew that. We knew it. We knew exactly what they were going to do. It was just a matter of you had to put together a game plan to take advantage of where you had a mismatch. Isiah Canion, and you were able to get the ball to the tight ends.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Why keep going back at the middle of the field? You were able to take advantage of when Georgia was sitting in that zone coverage, and that tight end was running down the field and turning around and showing Haynes his number. Hit him. Go back to it. Because I'm real big on, KISS. Keeping it simple, stupid. If it works, run it again, coach, until they adjust. And then once they adjust to that, then you go find number 4 on the outside, Isiah Canion. Because that is the guy that I feel like you should feed this man. Feed this man the rock, because, like I said, I'll say it again, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. Isiah Canion is a mismatch for you. And you don't have that from a wide receiver standpoint outside of that. Rutherford can take advantage of some corners, some guys, right? Because of speed and shiftiness. But when you're talking about just being a straight up mismatch, that last play, the Hail Mary, he was probably this close from making a play until somebody, we ain't gonna call no names, but basically took him down before the ball got there.
Oh yeah, I was about to say, yeah. Do we call pass interference on Hail Mary plays? Because I certainly think
let him play. Caleb, gotta let him play, right?
I think there was a guy in red with the number 8 that certainly could have gotten called for pass.
Who was flagged earlier in the game as well, and they end up picking that one up. So there you go.
Well, that was early. We obviously talked about missed opportunities, and you think about a play like that where it could have been back-to-back pass interference calls against the Dogs. Haynes, though, has got to throw a more catchable ball.
Yes,
that the officials don't look at and go, he couldn't have gotten that. So
they don't look at Kirby and say, oh yeah, Kirby is right. It's not a catchable ball.
Yeah. And that was look, we're going to have some more time in the coming days to break this down game further. Specifically, I also, Jarvis, want to get into something that people were curious where it was going to be a big factor, which was the environment, where they decided to play this game at, the crowd involvement, all of those sorts of things. Were certainly an interesting element of this game that I don't think played as big of a factor as maybe a lot of people thought, but that is topics for future coming days, as far as especially getting into what the future of this Georgia Tech program looks like following this loss, and having a regular season that you go 1-3 to end your year, and now you look towards the future of potentially maybe you can back your way into the ACC championship game, or you're looking at a bowl game later on down the road. That'll do it, though, for this episode of Locked On Georgia Tech. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and anywhere you listen to our podcast for free. Follow the show on social media at Locked On Georgia Tech, as well as Jarvis at JarvisD90. I'm at ATL Johnson 18. Thank you for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day. Until next time, y'all have a good one.